My name is Michael Wu, and today I'm going to talk to you about how I got into Harvard. I'm going to take you through from the very beginning steps, what I did, to the very end, and all my different thoughts, mentality, and advice that I have for you in between. Alright, so let's get into it. Just like you, I last year as an incoming senior was very lost going into this process. And not only that, I was feeling a bit overwhelmed too. I remember watching all these different videos on YouTube just like you and being a little confused and overwhelmed with the total amount of work that I had. Because I had this vague idea of how much work it was going to be, but I didn't know the specifics and I didn't want to find out because it felt like this huge undertaking. So if that's you right now, I just want to reassure you that with some perspective now, looking back, college applications was one of the best time periods of my life. And I know you'll never ever hear anyone else say that, but honestly for me, the way I approached it was, I think, pretty unique and pretty different. And I'm not just saying this because the decision ended up being one that I really was happy about. I mean that, like, the process was an incredibly rewarding experience for me. I grew so much as a person and began to really understand who I was more. And so there's a lot of potential in this application for you to find yourself and make this something more than just like a burden or a task that you don't want to do. So that's kind of like the first piece of advice that I give. Now, taking you back to the very beginning and the process that I took, first you got to get inspired. I remember going to the East Coast for the first time with my dad and going on a college tour of the different schools that I was thinking about applying to. And it was just an incredibly inspiring experience to see these schools, feel the vibe on campus, see these really passionate people, and it just drove me to get started on college applications. If you can't do that, there are a ton of different ways for you to get inspired online. Videos you can watch, research that you can do. You don't have to go visit these colleges, but I'd say the first thing that you want to do is get inspired. And that's key, right? So once you do that, I came home and really began methodically planning out this process. So the number 2 piece of advice that I give you is you have to be disciplined during this process, right? So that's key. You gotta start early and you gotta promise yourself that you're gonna stick to deadlines that you make. The specific way that I did this was I made a list of all the schools that I was going to apply to and planned out all the different essay deadlines and when they were due. And also all the different essays that they required too as well. And then from there, I put those essays into a Google Calendar and then plotted out everything that I had to do for the entire year, actually. And that made me feel a lot less overwhelmed. That really helped the process because when you break it down into smaller steps, it becomes a lot more manageable and you can get started with writing your essays. Alright, so the third piece of advice that I think is really important is on empathy. Basically, you want to put yourself in the shoes of what it's like to be a college admissions officer. Right? Understand that process of what it's like to go through thousands of essays and try to understand what would make a certain applicant stand out. College applications officers are people first and foremost. They are human, so you want to make them feel emotions too when you're writing your essays. That's the biggest thing, right? So put yourself in their shoes and see what it was like to be them. You really want to understand what they look for as well in a school, and every school is different, right? So every admissions officers will look for different things. So you want to figure out what each admissions officer will value, and then figure out from there, try to not change yourself as a person, but make sure that your values and things like that are reflected within that essay, and make them want you as an applicant, and make sure you talk about that fit. So yeah, that's the third point on empathy. All right, so now the fourth piece of advice is on introspection and how to do that, right? Just as a general disclaimer, you don't have to be a great essay writer to write a great personal statement or supplement essay. It's all about presenting who you are as a person and really looking within and digging deep and figuring out who you are and what makes you different from others. Those are the 2 main questions that you want to think about. And if you don't come up with answers immediately, it's totally okay. These are really difficult questions, but in general, the people that end up doing the best in college applications and life in general are the people that give these difficult questions the most thought, right? So you want to begin thinking about them and set aside enough time for you to really dig deep and understand who you are, what makes you different. Key point, because you really got to think about who you are as an individual and what makes you different from your friends, right? So that's different from who am I, because now you want to think about why you're different. And you want to communicate that to your college, to the college admissions officer. That's all college apps really are. Who am I and what makes you different? For me, I remember the process. I specifically remember the thinking that I went through as well. I wanted to I didn't want to fall into that typical stereotype of like, oh, he's just another Asian kid with good test scores and does science research, because I felt like that wasn't just who I was as a person, right? And there's nothing wrong with doing any of those things. I did those, right? It's just that like, you got to understand that college admissions officers are reading thousands of essays about kids who do research or kids who do their clubs, and you got to find a way that makes yourself stand out. And you got to think about like, as a person, what makes me different from others? And you really got to give that a lot of thought. Just to talk about my 2 essays and my like Harvard application, what I submitted, like maybe that'll help you, maybe that'll help inspire you a little bit. In terms of what I talked about in my personal statement, it was about the failures that I experienced, and as a result of those failures, how I was able to push through and like grow as a person. And that sounds like a very generic topic, right? But I made it mine, and I made it special. So I have a lot of different scars that like I've accumulated in my 18 years of existence. A lot of different times that I've fallen on a bike or like done stupid things. In high school, there were 3 that really stood out for me. One, I like stabbed myself with a scalpel while working at my chem lab. It was pretty bad, and that was like one of the scariest moments of my life. There was a lot of blood. I got like stitches to cover it up on my hand. So I talked about that. So like that was one of the moments. Another moment was when I fell on a hurdle, and it was really bad, and I like tore myself up. And then the third moment was when I broke my foot during Spirit Week sophomore year as a part of student council. So I took all those defining moments, I think, of failure for me, and I tied them together to this concept of physical scars, and how these scars are representations of my personality, what drives me, what motivates me, and how I push myself past the edge and past the limit of what I'm capable of, and that kind of allows me to be successful in what I do. Those are the ways that I made myself stand out as an applicant. Not only did I like talk about what was authentic to me and real to me, I also made sure that it fit the school as well, and talked about how there was a fit, and made the admissions officers really want me as an applicant. So that's my process of writing essays, or that's like those are the 2 essays that I wrote about. In terms of how I came up with them, when you're doing brainstorming or writing, you really want to make sure that you're focused in and you're locked in a room or something. You're in places that you're productive in, and I remember going to the local libraries. I would go to parks, different places, and just sit down and think about myself and write material. So that's what I would say in terms of writing. That's my advice. You really want to sit down and just think. You're gonna have to spend time on it. There is no shortcut around this. You just gotta sit down and think about who you are as a person. All right. I'd say that's pretty much it for my story. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching that video. We really appreciate the support. If you're on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and head over to our company website at etruscan.xyz. There you can make an account and take full advantage of all the free services that we're offering. Thank you for choosing Etruscan.